There we go. Okay, I'll bring this meeting of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority of the City of Crescent City and County of Del Norte to order on this Tuesday, November 22nd. It is 4 p.m. And Kira, if you would call the roll.
Commissioner Tompkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Inscore?
Here.
Chair Short?
And I am here. If you would join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, at this point is our public comment section on the agenda. Any member of the public may address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter on or off the agenda. Each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes to make their comment. Do we have any public online? Nobody joining us. And we have no public comment in the room. So we'll close public comment at this time and move on to our consent agenda, which is approval of the minutes from our regular session, Tuesday, October 18th. And approval of payment claim number 9386 for invoice number 022 in the amount of $6,761.71 for marine flare collection and the exchange event preparation. Do we have any public comment on the consent agenda? Bring it back to the board. Is there any comments, or could I entertain a motion?
Just a comment. I don't necessarily want to pull anything, but just as a thought, Director Ward, and this item 1.2 is here as a repeat because there was a question about all of this by some of our commissioners at our last meeting. I might just suggest when it's something such as this where it involves somebody coming and there being travel expenses and everything, if you could just put a single page staff report that simply says, this is for this associated with this, and this is why you have these receipts, I think that maybe that would make it easier for the commissioners to simply understand why we're being given this request. So,
Thank you for that comment, and I wanted to let the board know that I did follow up with Commissioner Starkey on her questions at the last meeting. And she clarified that her primary concern was essentially bringing this on as an urgency item. Apart from that, those were her primary concerns, so she was fine with it being a regular consent agenda item. Just she didn't like the principle of us ever paying a bill by putting it out in an urgency when it's just regular work that we're completing. That's what she expressed at the time.
very good. With that, I would make a motion that we approve consent items 1.1, 1.2.
Now second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any, I already asked for public comment, so Kira, if you would poll the roll.
Commissioner Tompkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Inscore?
Yes.
Chair Short?
Yes.
And I'm sorry for mentioning this late, but we did need to make one comment, one change to the minutes in that Sal Munoz is actually Development Director for Redwood Parks Conservancy rather than Redwood Parks. So we want to make sure that that's clear.
Very good. Okay, moving on to director's reports. Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Chair Short. So it's been a busy month, in part because we've had some collection events that we'll talk about in a little bit. Other things that have happened have been security related. We've continued to work on trying to enhance the cage for the backup batteries and enhancing that security system. That's not yet operational, but we are trying to take steps so that that's operational before the Thanksgiving holiday. May or may not happen. We're pretty close. On the 26th of October, a large branch fell on the rate signs in front of the Klamath transfer station, so we needed to replace those. So you'll see a bill for that next month. On the 27th of October, we participated in the community-wide tsunami drill, and that was a good exercise in that the office staff had never evacuated on foot through the forest, which is the path that gets us to the meeting up location, which is in the parking lot of the Elk Valley Rancheria tribal office. And so it was good that we went through that, and I applaud the Emergency Operations Services for encouraging the whole community to participate in that.
Director Ward, did you time yourself in making the trip?
We did not, but lots of observations, such as we noticed in order to get to the parking lot, we actually went over a rise and then went down again before going up again. So that certainly was on our mind as we were walking through there. And we all said, had this been an actual emergency, we would be running.
Good to know.
But on the whole, I think that's good, and it's good to practice such things. Hambro staff have noticed a leak in the water supply piping for the transfer station, and that they've had very large water bills of late, and so they're currently, until we can detect and fix that leak, we're in the habit of turning off water at night at the transfer station and turning it on and again in the morning. But Joel and his crew are continuing to try to chase that down so that we can get it fixed. When we have further information on that, I'll let you know. There was also communication with Aaron Babcock of the Del Norte Fire Safe Council. He was proposing that we restart the practice of stockpiling and periodically burning brush at the Gasky transfer station. My limited understanding is that the laws pertaining to brush burning at solid waste facilities have changed quite a bit since the last time we were doing that. And so I asked Huamua, who's from the Del Norte County Environmental Health Department, about this. The following day, he spoke with Cal Recycle, who sent back a quote of a public resources code that essentially affirmed it's very, very unusual to have open burning of anything at a solid waste facility, and we would have to meet special approvals. And I could see perhaps doing an event, but more likely not. In general, as an ongoing activity, I don't see a way to permit it, referring to the public resources codes. But I just wanted to inform the board in case you had further thoughts on that. Also happened, attached to the director's report, is the Form 303, which is an annual report of the household hazardous waste management activities of the previous year. And then there's also a report from Michael McClellan, before and after pictures of some of his landfill maintenance activities out there. Generally, we go through a process of winterization to clear the debris from the drainage structures and to make sure that when the rainstorms hit, they do a minimum of damage and the water goes through the surface drainage structures that are there to carry that surface water. So appreciate that. Couple other things that happened on the 3rd of November, I made a presentation to the Rotary Club on the practical proposals for plastic and other problematic packaging. And during this past month, we spoke with Tommy Contreras and Andrea Langtot of the Del Norte and Adjacent Tribal Lands Food Council, discussing SB 1383 and how we hope to continue partnering with them to meet some of those requirements. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Gentlemen?
Regarding that issue around burning, removing flammable material from around your facility, is there an alternative, for instance, just cutting it and hauling it away and burning it?
Well, it's important to understand that we currently have a brush service at the Gasky transfer station. Residents can bring in brush for a rate that's about 1/3 of the price of trash, and we have that every day the Gasky transfer station is open, which is Saturdays throughout the year and Thursdays and Saturdays during the summer months. So brush service is available. The Fire Safe Council was interested in trying to arrange some sort of a larger community event or larger activity so that we could regularly receive it. And as I informed Mr. Burton, at the time we were doing this activity, it was the main source of violations, for permit violations, at the Gasky transfer station. And ironically, the Forest Service personnel were the ones responsible for maintaining that brush pile and periodically burning it. And so U.S. Forest Service employees are not our employees, so we don't have the ability to direct them or insist anything. All we could do is say, well, gosh, if we're going to be in violation of our operations, then maybe we need to look at a different way of doing this. So the ball is really in the Forest Service's lap. However they would like to proceed with this, we're eager to try to support the efforts of the Fire Safe Council within the limits of our permits and regulations. In general, I support the concept, but there are some critical issues, such as who maintains the pile, who makes sure that it's just brush and not other materials, how long does the pile sit before it's actually burned, when it is burned, who's responsible for the fire safety, and what happens to the ground afterwards. Another ongoing issue for these kinds of things is that oftentimes the materials are gathered during the wet months, or they're fresh cut green material, and then they don't start on a fire very readily, and so it's common that people will add accelerants such as fuels. Well, there's laws against doing that, and so there's a fundamental challenge of trying to have one party responsible for the management of the pile and its burning periodically, and another entity responsible for the regular operations, making sure that we're abiding by all of our environmental rules. And so we need to have a way of working out these issues one way or the other, and I'd be happy to continue the discussion, but under my read of the current law, I don't see a way to have this as an ongoing activity at the Gasky transfer station.
Thank you.
Would it not make more sense from the standpoint of impact to, if we're trying to do some kind of community event like this, for the Forest Service to take on the responsibility of maybe a large chipping activity, and instead of pile this stuff up to burn it, put this stuff into a bark format that could then turn around and be used back safely around properties and flower beds and so forth, without all the impacts that trying to burn this stuff, because then again, with that, even the wet material, that's not going to be a problem for a large chipper. Years ago, I worked for the Park Service, local Park Service, and we chipped everything, and then that material was put right back into the park district.
I think that's an excellent suggestion, and we did have at least one such event this summer up in Gasky.
Right.
So I think that's entirely possible. But in the conversations with Mr. Babcock, that's not what he was proposing. He was proposing, let's get back to that regular thing where people can bring their brush and they can put it in this pile and it would be periodically burned. So I'm absolutely willing to work with anybody who wants to organize such an event. And I agree that chipping in general is much more compatible with our regulations and laws than trying to burn it.
Even if we found some way to help facilitate that in some fashion, it's going to be a lot easier for us to partner with an event like that than what used to
And in
happen.
terms of an event, I mean, just looking at the Gasky community, and other communities have done this at airports, and in some ways that makes a certain amount of sense
Sure.
to me, but I have to acknowledge that they asked us about our facility. It's not entirely appropriate for me to suggest somewhere else. All I can do is respond to the challenges of our facility.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay,
That-
shall
go
I
ahead.
move on?
Yep,
Okay.
feel free.
Moving on to items 2.2, these are the financial reports. The first one is the cash flow. So we have 1.7 million in the bank plus 198,000 for last month's rent. So that's the snapshot of what our cash flow is doing. Looking at claims approved by director, once again, you see the largest expenses for Hamburg WSG for the good services they provide at the Del Norte County Transfer Station, and other large expenses include the payment for the debit credit machine and transactions, and then Dave Mason for doing some landfill vegetation control at the landfill. And I believe last meeting there were some questions about that, but it's worth noting that that was necessary because we had received some violations about vegetation control, and the work that needs to be done out at the landfill, as it is a public facility, is paid at prevailing wages, and so that makes those costs a good deal more expensive. Moving on to the AR aging summary, as you can see, pretty much everything that's over 90 days has been turned over to collections, thanks to Kathy Brewer's good work managing that. Looking at our the monthly cash and charge reports for October, October was a pretty large month in general. It was very similar to the amount of activity we saw in, I'm sorry, November was a big, wait. I'm seeing I have filled in November, and I couldn't have because we had not come to November yet. So, sorry about that. But in general, the revenues are coming in a little bit heavier than we anticipated for October, so that's good news, and we are ahead of budget. So, again, I apologize for the table mishap.
No problem.
So that concludes the financial reports. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Anything, Mike? No? Blake? Okay. Feel free to move on there, Mr. Ward.
All right. So we'll move on to we have a couple event reports about the marine flare collection event and then the bulky item collection event. And let's see, I want to go back
Hey, there's
one.
Bev.
There we are. Okay, so this is an event report regarding the first ever marine flare collection event in Delaware County, and credit to Cure Seymour and to our partners at California Product Stewardship Council for getting this together under a grant through Cal Recycle under the HD 33 grant program. Like I said, this is the first ever collection event. Marine flares are problematic in that they are required by the U.S. Coast Guard on all ocean-going vessels, and they need to have 3 of them on board, and they essentially cycle them through every 3 years, and they're explosives and so are not easily put into our other programs for solid waste or hazardous waste. And so here's Bev Knoll to tell you about her experience at the event. And I wanted to record Bev specifically because many of you know she, of course, was associated with the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary for many years. And marine flares were an ongoing vexing problem for her. And she would come to us and say what a problem they were, and we'd talk about, we agree how much of a problem they were, and we didn't really have a lot of options until this program. So she's been aware of this as a problem for many years.
Back in here, but the flare thing is also part of the issue, because what happens to the flares? Can't get rid of them. People throw them in the water, they throw them down the gopher holes, they throw them every place. They do all those bad things with who knows how toxic they are. How toxic are they? Really bad stuff. So I started, just can't help it, but people had to get rid of their stuff. I ended up with a shed full and no way to get rid of them, because when I started calling, I went down through the Bay Area. I've talked to a lot of the people that maybe you guys have talked to or been associated with. Vivian is one of them that comes to mind right now, but also there are several others down there. I have probably a file box full of paperwork on what you folks are doing right now. And I was sort of forced into sort of just walking away from it, but here I am.
And you did trainings, right?
I did trainings. I'm in different capacities. Okay, first capacity, I'm in the Coast Guard Auxiliary, who does exams. So we go down to make sure that everybody is safe on their boat, on the recreational boat. We also jump over into the commercial fleet if we're trained to do so, which I was. Now I'm going to step out of that field, and what I did is work for Alaska Marine Safety Education on the actual training for the commercial fishermen to be able to have all the safety equipment that they needed on the boat to make sure that they survive. I sat on the federal committee back in Washington, D.C., worked for our fishermen, as well as I worked with the Coast Guard to bond those two together. And here I am today with
participating in our first ever marine flare collection event. And we're here with CPSC, and we have electronic signaling devices as replacements for those.
oh, I don't know what I'll do.
Okay.
Card back in here.
Oops,
But
sorry.
the flare thing,
There we go. So there's a picture of the setup, and there's a picture of a filled container. They just dip them in water to make sure that they're no longer explosive, and then we shipped out nearly a pallet of those materials. Here's information on the E-flares, and then there's Bev. And we had 38 vehicles, which was far larger than Alameda, which has way more people and way more boats. And so this was a tremendously successful event. And all participants received the U.S. Coast Guard approved reusable E-flare signaling devices as well as a boating safety kit. So very successful event. Again, gratitude and applause to Kira and to CPSC. I'd be happy to answer any questions, or Kira can pipe in with anything I've forgotten.
Got anything for us, Kara? Yeah?
You got it. I mean, it's all there. It's all with what Bev said, and I'm just really honored to be able to have done this program, because some of you know, some of you don't know, but in my former life, I was a merchant marine and a blue water sailor. So I do what I can to protect the ocean when I can. And so it's a labor of love for me. And we learned a lot in this event. First of all, that it happened, that it was successful, very pleased. But we did learn that people that in the boating community who can probably navigate extremely well on waterways, a little bit less so or differently in land traffic ways. So we'll be increasing our traffic plan set up with cones and arrows, and they were great. Everyone was great. It's every community has its quirks, and we love them and we need them.
We had buoys.
Buoys,
Oh
they were
yes,
just
that's a
fine.
good idea. Thank you. And red right returning, we need all that stuff.
Yeah, and foghorns.
Oh, goodness. That's great. Well, Kara, good work. Thank you for that. That is outstanding. I guess we'll move on to our free bulk item. Well, if you'll allow me, I think Dominic's here for the next item, 7.1, abandoned vehicle abatement service. If you'll indulge me, and we can skip to that so Dominic can get back to his day. Maybe that would be a good thing. Welcome, sir.
So we have our fourth quarter report, and we ended up towing 13 automobiles and 2 recreational vehicles, and then 7 people voluntarily moved their vehicles after notices were posted. And the tally there on the back is the conclusion of the 4 quarters for the fiscal year of 21-22 for the AVA program. And we ended up having 79 tows throughout the course of the year, with 10 people voluntarily complying, getting their vehicles moved out of the roadway. So good year, and our budget remains to be strong, so things are going well. You guys
Good deal.
Yeah. Do you guys have any questions or anything?
I'd just like to comment that our goal on many of these things is compliance. And I just really appreciate, looking at the stats, that about a third of the folks that you're engaging with and vehicles being in the wrong place, you were able to encourage them to move them without any additional expense from the AVA. So I think that's just great, because doing 100% of them, the budget would not go as far.
No, and that's why we got the notices. We have a 72-hour notice. It's just like a fluorescent orange. We mark various vehicle codes on there. And sometimes people just end up storing their vehicle out in front of their property, and it looks like it's abandoned, and that tag motivates them to get out there and wash it, maybe air up the tires or sell it, or whatever they end up doing with it. So it's good never to assume that something is abandoned and tow it immediately. Get that notice posted, and yeah.
So I know that there is at least 2 enterprises that will accept donations free. If you've got your registration and stuff, you can call a number and they'll come and take the vehicle as a donation. to charitable donation. I'm wondering if that information were provided, it would increase the number of voluntary compliance.
You know, it may, and that's a good thing to bring up. I should research that a little bit, because sometimes vehicle owners will call and give me a backstory on that vehicle, whether they're trying to get rid of it or someone abandoned it there or whatever. And that could be a good direction to send some people to have that resource to get rid of a, vehicle.
Great.
And go to a good cause. So good thought there.
Hey, Dominic, in some areas a little more often than others, we have trailer fires and vehicle fires. Does dealing with those after they're burnt, does it impact this budget item, or is there another funding stream where the county uses to get rid of those?
Yes, so definitely I'll use a different funding stream to address vehicles of that nature. Now, if we're running with a good year and we have a surplus of money, I'll pull from the AVA.
Oh.
So I kind of usually reference that as extending my reach a little farther with the AVA funds. If we start consuming them too much, then we dial them back, because I want to have that money on hand to tow from our major highways and neighborhoods and whatnot. But otherwise, we'll fall back on the professional budget of code enforcement to start towing those vehicles you see
Okay.
farther out and that get burned.
Good deal. Seems like there's been a rash of them in the last few weeks, so I was kind of curious.
There has been. So we're kind of working on a few different things on the code enforcement side with get some contracts with different contractors and stuff. So that's going to give us the resources to start getting back in them wooded areas and pulling those burnt things out. And we've really been kind of hamstrung with not having the appropriate equipment on tap to get that done. So we've had the funding to dispose, but the tow trucks can't get back in those wooded areas. So now we're able to, go out and hire a backhoe or an excavator or where that appropriate tool is and start pulling them out. So we're going to be seeing that coming up here, or, early next year. We'll start seeing that stuff get implemented, and you'll see some of them vehicles disappearing. So
Good deal.
yeah, I'm
And
excited
that's-
about that.
And that's something, it was educational for me, that you can't just ask the road department, hey, use your excavator and go. That's not as easy as it sounds. is it?
No, because the road department's funded through the field tax, so the field tax is supposed to be for road work. So if I'm pulling them and we're using that resource to do non-road work, I have to pay them back.
Right.
Which is fine, and we do have a line item for that. But a lot of times the road department, their tools, so their excavator doesn't have a thumb. It's got a clamshell, so it doesn't really work effective in trying to pull out
Right.
garbage or remove things. But
Sure.
Yeah, different animal there.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of make that clear to whoever's listening, that it's not as easy as that sounds. Even
No.
though the road department has some cool equipment, it's not as easy
Not as
just
easy.
asking them to
Things
go
are ear
help
tag
out.
different, or
Yeah.
And at risk of stating the obvious, every minute those vehicles are sitting around out there, they're polluting our system, our whole, because that area, that drainage just spreads out and out and out into people's wells. And so getting rid of them soonest is good.
Definitely, and then that's why there's some good codes in the vehicle code that specifically mention the health and hazards risk of that, and allow us to have that lawful ability to remove vehicles. And we're piecing that together, and with funding and different contracts and support, so we'll start being more effective.
Good deal. All right, anything else?
Awesome.
All right, thanks, excellent, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Mello.
Yep.
Appreciate you being here. Okay, Mr. Ward?
All right. So now we're at item 6.2, and we're talking about the large item dump day. Also, this is the first time we've ever done this kind of thing in Crescent City, at least since my employment began in 1994. So I'm not aware of another thing, but thanks to Caltrans, and they're bringing these resources. And here we have another video showing what the day looked like. So just panning around, you can see the traffic goes by the entrance where they're getting surveyed, and then it loops around the backside of the administrative building and then comes in front of the HHW building. So during that same day, we were open to regular traffic. And so on that one day, we provide service to nearly 500 customers, which was a lot. But again, great work by the Hambro WSG crew. Joel himself was driving equipment that day. And the Recology driver was like a surgeon, did just a great job. Very tight spaces, but all done very safely. No injuries or accidents throughout the day. And typical wait time, even for this free event, was about an hour. So on the whole, I think it went pretty well. The last customer ended about 2:15, and this is another pan through. You can see how it's working. So we had metals and furniture on either side, and then we'd alternate which side we were filling so that the others could be emptied. On the whole, we had 270 vehicles, 48 refrigerators, 85 metal appliances, over 1,000 tires, 167 pieces of furniture, 266 mattresses and box springs, 2.4 tons of metal. On the whole, 44.8 tons received, with about 52% of that being recycled. And during that same event, to try to reduce traffic, we did encourage customers that had nothing but mattresses to go to Humboldt Moving and Storage that day, as they do provide a mattress recycling service through the Mattress Recycling Council from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m. on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And so we wanted to encourage people to become familiar with that regular service rather than bringing those materials into our event.
On that note, I want to point out, as I was coming in with my load, I drove by Moving and Storage, and they were getting ready to close the doors on one of the big trailers, moving trailers, completely full, but he had room for one more, so I threw mine in there. Oh, you would have had 267.
And you said you had further comments about the line at the time that we saw each other.
Well, you know, it was interesting. It was one of those things that's going to happen in that kind of a situation. When you get to the end of the admin building, there was a staff member there kind of trying to get the two lines pulled together. And some of us in one line found ourselves being passed by people that came 10 to 15 minutes after we did. So it was kind of like, that didn't feel good, you know.
Right.
But it's going to happen. She was doing the best she could. I'm assuming, you know, she was. I don't think she looked at me and said, we're going to hold you back because of who you are. So, anyway. So
thank you for your understanding. And yes, when those two lines become one line, it becomes really difficult to say you first, because what will tend to happen is the car behind will tailgate the car ahead, and then you've got no separation to work with. So that kind of thing happened.
Yeah. So anyway.
Thank you for attending. Thank you for participating. And then a happy ending on the other side of the tracks. CAL FIRE brought in those metal tracks you're seeing on the picture there, and those are really useful when trying to drive heavy equipment on wet ground. So we have need for those occasionally out at the landfill. We could potentially have need for them if there was an emergency in any of the areas that are wetter. So we were working with Hambro, and we've stored those safely, and they're available for either of us should we need it. So one more use.
And you didn't keep the piano.
There were several pianos and organs. No, we didn't keep them. But yes, we did receive those. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
No questions? No questions. Thank you.
Well, I will say this. I was grateful for that service. As a landowner who's got people living on my property that tend to collect things, I was really grateful for that service.
Mm-hmm. Throughout the planning stages of this, we emphasized to Caltrans that we hesitated to have this kind of event because we didn't want to create an incentive for people to accumulate things. But as we've now completed the events in Klamath, Gasky, Smith River, and Crescent City, I'd say probably between 10 and 25% of the materials that we received looked like it had been outside for some time. And I think it's safe to say without these kinds of events, that 25% of the material would still be out somewhere. So I think that part is a success. Additionally, there's always a proportion of folks who are looking for a good deal, and that is my biggest concern about these kinds of events, in that I really hesitate to create any kind of incentive for people to just wait for the next free event. And so I want to emphasize to anybody listening at home that if you're a Recology Del Norte customer and they collect trash from your house, and they have done so for at least 90 days, that you get 2 free bulky items collections included with that service. So there are free bulky item services that are available in the community, and if you're not sure about how to access those, give us a call at 465-1100, and we'll do the best we can to help you navigate that.
It does remind me of a question I had. The day before this event, on the radio, they reminded everybody of the event and said it was a free dump day, which we all know is completely misinformation. I thought, oh goodness, I hope that really does not create a terrible situation, but it seems like it went fine.
It did, and thank you for the exact same sensitivity that we had but Caltrans chose the name Free Dump Days. And they were insistent on that branding statewide, and so the only flexibility we got from them on that is calling this a free bulky item dump day. But they really wanted the free dump day as part of the branding.
Well, if they want to pay for a free dump day.
And they did. Well, and hopefully we will receive that check before time.
Well, very good.
We did not start planning this event until we received full payment for all the prior events. So
That was part of the deal, yeah. Well, okay, with that, we are finished with our open session part of this meeting. So I will adjourn us into closed session, and I believe we likely will have nothing to report out from closed session. Is that correct, Mr.? Huh? I don't believe we will. So with that,
In hiatus, I'm going to use.
very, very good. Our next regularly scheduled meeting will be Tuesday, December 20th, right here at the Flynn Center, 4 o'clock. Thank you all for coming.